My name is Akhil Jugran, and I welcome you to the Poverty Agenda.
Please do like and subscribe to encourage the team at no cost to yourselves and support the discussion by commenting and sending in your contribution to the topic. Your suggestions and comments are always valued by the team.
What's the fuss? The intrusion into Jewish settlements on the 6th of October this year by Hamas and the slaughter of innocents by them again reminded the world of the horrors of terrorism. While most countries have denounced this attack by Hamas, the promises made to the Palestinians as ratified by the United Nations on various occasions continue to be denied to them. The Israeli nation state has declared war on the Hamas, which continues to this day and has no end date in sight. This event has really disturbed me, as it has millions of others across the globe. Having lived in India for a significant part of my life, I have acknowledged that my choices have been influenced by the self-interests of the period's politics, which largely remained non-aligned and offered the choices I, like many others, selected, like supporting the liberation of the Palestinians, having been convinced of their right to self-governed homeland, supported the struggle led by Ho Chi Minh for a free Vietnam, and among some other choices I made, supported the Tibetans in their struggle against the continued occupation of their country. What really disturbed me was Biden's statement, which, while supporting Israel's right to protect its citizens, mentions the right of the United States of America to safeguard its own self-interests in the Middle East. This sounds like echoes from the past when the French and British carved the Middle East to exploit its oil, gas, and other resources in the region, and while expanding its markets, also ensured the local politics to be subservient to their own. After years of war in this region, what exactly are the United States and Western interests in the Middle East, for which they need to ensure the removal of all dissent when they could simply negotiate fair deals for the products and services they require? This continued policy of bullying through a proxy is not to spread democracy and human rights in the world, but, on the contrary, to enforce the Western capitalistic culture that drives profit for the few businesses that prop up elected governments. The Western alliance has not yet learned its lessons from the engagements in Yemen, Somalia, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, Korea, Pakistan, China, Russia, the Philippines, African Franco and Anglo-ruled nations, and Ukraine, and continues walking the same vicious path that will eventually lead to its losing its popularity amongst all nations. What democracy means to me is centered on people's participation for, by, and of the people. The earliest record of a self-governing village body or a consultative system of governance was noted in the Rig Veda around 2000 years before the Christian era, which is now almost 5,000 years ago. With the passage of time, these bodies were called panchayats, 5-person councils, which were functional institutions of grassroots governance in almost every village in South Asia, and whose elected members covered both executive and judicial matters. Over millennia, governance through people's participation has been seen to best satisfy the for, by, and of the people criteria for self-determination. Democracy, as this system is widely known now, is acknowledged as the most inclusive form of governance and has been adopted by many countries as the approach to addressing and fulfilling the aspirations of their constituents. I firmly believe democracy to be the system of choice when compared with other forms of governance. What democracy means to most of us. The criteria for being considered a democratic country varies depending on where the definition is sourced from. However, some of the most cited criteria include: 1. Free and fair elections. Elections are a fundamental aspect of democracy. A democratic country must hold regular elections that are free and fair, meaning that all citizens have the right to vote and that the election process is transparent and unbiased. 2. A rule of law. A democratic country must be governed by the rule of law, which means that laws are applied equally to all citizens and that no one is above the law. 3. Civil liberties. A democratic country must protect the civil liberties of its citizens, including freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion. 4. The independent judiciary. A democratic country must have an independent judiciary that is free from political influence and that can hold the government accountable. 5. Separation of powers. A democratic country must have a system of checks and balances that ensures that no one branch of government has too much power. 6. Civilian control of the military. A democratic country must have civilian control over the military, meaning that the military is subordinate to civilian authority. 7. Political pluralism. A democratic country must allow for political pluralism, meaning that there are multiple political parties and that citizens have a choice in who they elect to represent them.
Please do like and subscribe to encourage the team at no cost to yourselves and support the discussion by commenting and sending in your contribution to the topic. Your suggestions and comments are always valued by the team.
The most democratic countries in the world are Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and New Zealand. Self-interest and lobbying. If we agree that democratic governments are for, by, and of the people, then it is disheartening to see government apathy and antagonism against people's movements across the globe against government policy that supports and enforces the violation of human rights. This is not only true in the recent case of the Israeli issue with the existence of a Palestinian state, but also with governments in conflict with the people's aspirations, including the authoritarian, fascist, and dictatorial regimes who find it convenient to eradicate dialogue when it questions their unethical practices. Unfortunately, the role of the United Nations and its branches, the World Bank, the WHO, and FAO, require an overhaul to reinstate the collective authority of member countries and bring about their equality by removing the veto powers of the few who have shown their inability to follow the human rights agenda as created with the involvement of all members. Lobbying is an essential part of the democratic process, but should be open and serve the development interests of the people and not just of the capitalist-led democracies and wealthy businesses. The Treaty on the Limitation of Nuclear Weapons should also include the conventional with a reduction in their sales and their production. In conclusion, lobbying is a controversial practice that has both positive and negative aspects. It is important to ensure that lobbying is conducted in a transparent and ethical manner to prevent corruption and maintain the integrity of the democratic process. In conclusion, if the criteria for being a democracy doesn't fully measure up to expectations, then the constituency is not living in a democracy, but by rules dictated by self-interest groups who are granted advantages from the ruling party. Much has been reported on the strength of the Israeli lobby in the United States, while little has been reported on other governments being manipulated by lobbyists worldwide. Lobbying, although an essential part of the democratic process, should be transparent, presented and discussed in Parliament, and serve the development interests of the people and not just the capitalists and wealthy businesses. Relationships with regimes that do not fully comply with the mandate of the United Nations and continue to pursue the violation of human rights should in principle not be entertained or supported. The role of the United Nations and other multilaterals require an overhaul to reinstate the collective authority of member countries and bring about their equality by removing the veto powers of the few who have shown their inability to follow the human rights agenda as created with the involvement of all members. Or should each region create their own United Nations? Or have they already? The Treaty on the Limitation of Nuclear Weapons should be mandatory for all countries and also include conventional arms with a phase-out plan to reduce their production and sales. Thank you for being part of this presentation. Hope to see you soon.